meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Robin, can you do the roll call, please?
Here.
Member Crowe.
Here.
Member Foltz.
Here.
Member Morris is absent. Member Paul.
Here.
Member Rockwell.
Here.
Member Sparlingwood is absent. And Chair Jacobson.
Here. Thank you. All right. Just want to make sure so we have meeting minutes from last meeting that we need to approve.
Yes.
Oh, there they are. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have the adoption of the consent agenda is our next item. For those of you who aren't familiar, we haven't done these much. So everything on the consent agenda, if we approve it, would just be done. If there's something anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda and move to the regular, they're welcome to do that, and I will ask for public comment on that. So at this point, I would take a motion related to the consent agenda.
I have a question about the consent agenda. You want me to wait until discussion after somebody makes a motion?
I mean, officially, but no, go ahead if you want.
Well, I just, since, as you said, we haven't really done consent agenda very much, I was just curious, like, what qualifies something for discussion or presentation rather than being on the consent agenda? And then secondly, will these items that are on our consent agenda be on a consent agenda for the city as well? It just, I mean, they're not insignificant items, but I just didn't, well,
Yeah.
that's something I'm not terribly familiar with.
Yep, so, Mr. Chair, I'll answer in reverse order. So they will be on a consent agenda at the next city commission meeting. And typically the items we put on there, they're more like regular business. These are smaller items, they're not super small, but they're smaller dollar items. They're items that we have budgeted, that were in our work plans, that we were planning on doing. So it's like those types of regular business type items typically go on the consent agenda as part of just operating the business. So.
Thanks.
And in this motion, you have a choice to say, let's approve them all, let's pull individual ones out, let's pull them all out, maybe pull them out as a group, and we have lots of, you can give us a brief overview, or however you guys want to do it is fine.
Yes, we do have staff available to answer any questions if anyone wants to pull anything to the regular agenda.
So would anyone like to make a motion related to the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, any discussion on that? Any discussion from the public on the consent agenda? Nancy, come on down.
Good evening, Nancy Darren. On the charging stations, just thinking ahead in the future, I'm concerned if we always have private partnerships and they're making money off of it, and I have no idea. I'm just asking this question and thinking ahead about how are we going to diversify our revenue sources? How can we have ownership of things that are going to have a multiplier effect and protect us, and we earn the income from stuff? So it's just a comment more than anything else. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. Anyone else on this item? And just real briefly, I'll touch on, Tony and I talked on these. So the FileMaker database, it's a service. The charger, so they're asking for our support. This is support for us for GRU to apply to get some funds. So there's no money involved at this point. Potentially could be used to, 80-20 match to incentivize people to do stuff that would allow GRU to sell more electricity for EVs. That's all the exciting stuff. So if there's nothing further on that, I'll go ahead and call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. And Robin, I assume you saw that Member Sparlingwood is present. Welcome. All right. Yeah. So next, I would seek a motion related to the adoption of the agenda.
Move that we adopt the agenda?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Any discussion from the floor, the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes.
I approve that, make a motion that we approve the minutes from the April 25th, 2023 meeting.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? All those in favor, excuse me, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Moving right along, state of the utility.
So, Mr. Chair, tonight we have a couple of items on the agenda that are essentially around most of what we're doing at the utility. Besides normal operations, the big things that we're doing right now are associated with our budget and kicking off the integrated resource planning effort. And so we have two presentations addressing both of those topics. And so for State of the Utility, I just want to get right into the items and start on those items and use our time that way.
Okay, thank you.
So if we want to go to the business items, and we can start with the budget presentation.
So I'm sorry, are you saying that the business discussion items are going to be our state of the utility presentation?
Yeah. So like that's like the primary things we're doing at the utility right now are going through our budget process and the integrated resource plan. So,
Okay.
and those are the two topics on the agenda. So just kind of focus there.
Yeah. I do see a light on.
Yes. I was just wondering,
Do you have any date when the governor will be able to sign that?
That is the other big topic going on. Just don't have a ton of answers on it. So the governor has 15 days to sign the bill from when he receives it on his desk.
Okay.
He hasn't received it on his desk yet. So, so we don't know any more than that. Again, I'm learning more about the legislative process than I've ever wanted to, but
yes.
he gets bills in batches, and he just hasn't gotten the batch that includes that local bill yet. And so when he does, then he has 15 days to sign it. Or you reached, I think it's June 30th, and if he hasn't vetoed it or hasn't signed it by June 30th, it automatically goes to law. So those are the two paths, or three paths: vetoes it, signs it, or the clock runs out and it goes to law.
All right. And so, not to get ahead of ourselves, but related to the UAB, it's not clear at this point what happens, assuming he does sign this, whether July 1 we're done or October 1 we're done. It's just not clear at this
So yeah, so Mr. Chair, what we're trying to do right now is work with the city attorney to determine what the bill means. So, some of it's clear, some of it's not so clear. And so we're trying to detail out what each of the sections of the bill means, go through that with the city attorney, and then we'll have like a determination on that, and we'll let you know. And I think, it may be, as you stated, that the UAB would sunset on June 30th with the July 1st effective date, or potentially sunset on September 30th with a October 1st date of the board starting. So that we're trying to get clarification on that now.
All right, I see a light. Can't see whose light. Is that Fletcher?
I read that the bill was finally adopted with no amendments. Is that true, or were there any amendments that we ought to be aware of?
So there were no amendments. There were, I think, 6 amendments proposed during the legislative process when it was in the House, but none of those were adopted. So the final language that had gone to the House floor was what was adopted by the House, and then it was adopted on consent agenda at the Senate level.
And just to be clear, so there was the very original version, which was just the description of the UAB with the word governor put in, and then there were some amendments done before it went to the House.
But
It's a 14-page bill now.
Correct.
Instead of a 5.
Correct.
And I've read it all. I have my arguments with a few points of it, but anyway, but I'm just a Joe Blow.
Gotcha.
Fletcher, you had anything else on that?
well, you're saying it's a 14-page bill now?
Yes,
The original one was 5?
Right.
yes.
Okay, Robin, can you send us the 14-page version that we can double check with our records?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
You good?
It's,
All right. Anything else? Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to save this for a comment, but since we're on this topic anyway, I have a question. I heard somebody say once, and I don't remember the source or know the accuracy of it, but I heard somebody say once that GRU is essentially a DBA of the city of Gainesville. And so I'm curious, like, what is the line between property that belongs to GRU and property that belongs to the city of Gainesville? Is there a distinction legally?
So we are doing business as GRU, but we do have property that are on our books. So we're an enterprise fund, and we have property that are on our books. I don't know if that clarifies, and I don't know if anyone else wants to clarify that more. Bianca, is there anything different?
Bianca Larison. I don't have anything different than what Tony said. Yes, GRU is an enterprise of the city. It's so whenever you see a GRU contract, it'll say the city of Gainesville doing business as GRU.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the reason I ask that is because if and when this new authority is seated, property assets that belong to GRU then come under their direction, right? Those are not assets and property that the city controls. Is that?
We're still trying to figure that out, but at the moment, our interpretation is that the facilities and everything owned by GRU remains to be owned by GRU, and GRU is still an entity of the city. The authority is an entity of the city as well. So we're very confused about the bill, but we're trying our best to understand it.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is, as these interpretations become clear, which I assume they'll probably end up becoming clear in a court of law at some point, is the city talking about transferring property that currently belongs to GRU to the city so that it's very unambiguous that some other body couldn't come in and say, well, we don't need this, let's sell this. We don't need this, let's sell this. And I'm not talking about the individual pieces of the utility, but I'm just talking about property and assets.
I am not aware if that is happening, but that would be up to the discretion of the city commission. I am not aware of anything like that happening.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else before we move off the state of the utility? Okay, with that, let's go ahead and jump into business items. So,
Mr. Chair, Mark Benton is going to give a presentation. So on April 13th, the City Commission approved a plan for the city and GRU to work toward a 70% capitalization rate for the utility, which would include a $315 million net reduction in our debt. As part of that plan, the utility needs to reduce expenses. And so what we are doing is coming back to the UAB and the City Commission with what those reduction in expenses are. So we established a budget to continue to deliver utility service next year. And we took that budget and reduced it by this amount, and that reduction would be applied to debt to be a part of that plan of the $315 million reduction. So with that, if I keep talking, I'm going to do all of Mark's presentation for you. So
I was going to say, I think the general manager just gave you an excellent overview, and I'm here to answer any questions. So.
Mr. Ben, before you get started, I have specific questions about specific line items in this presentation. Do you want me to hold those to the end or as they come up?
We've got 3 slides where we line out some of the specific changes. I think that'd probably be a good place for you to ask, but it's good whenever you have a question, just fire it off. We'll do our best to answer it.
Thank you.
So like the general manager said, we met with the City Commission sitting as a General Policy Committee on April 13th, and basically we committed to $28 million in O&M budget reductions over the next decade to assist us in getting to that 70% target capitalization rate. And so this presentation is basically to talk through our proposal for the cuts for the first year of that 10-year plan. We're going to start by just briefly covering the budget timeline, and this is the commission timeline, but we've been through 3 meetings so far. You've heard us, we've talked about the debt, we've talked about the new government services contribution formula. You saw the last meeting, you saw the customer sales and revenue forecast. We have 2 meetings in May. The one that we're doing tonight here, we'll do the same presentation to the City Commission on Monday. And then on the 22nd, we'll talk with the Commission. On the 23rd, I believe, we'll talk with you on the, Mr. Walters and some of his group. We'll talk about the fuels budget, talk about the fuel levelization process, which we've never really specifically spoken to during the budget process. We'll also talk about connection charges and lighting. There'll be a couple meetings in July, and that's where we will show the meat of the budget, the O&M and the capital detail. In August, there'll be an opportunity for the board and the City Commission to ask questions about what they've seen so far, and hopefully we'll get a head nod as to, that you're comfortable with what you've seen in the budget, the rates that are out there, so that we can go ahead and start preparing the ordinance that they'll have 2 readings in September.
I'm sorry, before you leave this, and I apologize a little bit for asking, this new authority, assuming it happens, is supposed to have their first meeting October 1st. Are all the budgets basically set and voted on and in place before that date?
We're moving forward with the budget timeline, the budget process as it normally unfolds, and you're correct. I think, and Bianca will correct me if I'm wrong, the effective date of the bill, if it's signed, is July 1st, but they're not. The board doesn't have its first meeting. They don't sit as the board until October 4th. So, yes, to answer your question succinctly, we're moving through as if business as usual.
Got it. Thank you.
Nothing to see. As you might imagine, the 24 budget development was significantly influenced by 2 of the primary findings in the Auditor General's report. Number 1, that we've got GRU has significantly more debt than a comparable municipal utility, and that the City Commission has never, no, that's not true, not never established. We haven't currently established a transfer formula methodology that was reasonable and consistent with GRU's ability to pay. So on April 13th, a joint presentation by General Government and GRU staff was made to the General Policy Committee with a proposal to meet those 2 findings. It had 2 pieces. One was to adopt a 10-year timeline to meet that 70% target capitalization rate that had already been codified inside GRU's debt management policy. And we also brought forth a methodology for the transfer. Had 2 pieces, a proxy for property tax and a proxy for franchise fee to form the new government services contribution.
Sorry, so just to be clear, you were tasked with coming up with a plan that would basically remove the, whatever it is, 15 to 17 million out of the...
I would not say that we were tasked with coming up with a formula that came to any specific number. What we were tasked with was coming up with a formula based on methodology that we thought was reasonable and consistent. Neither I nor my general government counterpart who worked on this had a number in mind when we started this. We were looking at the elements of a transfer that made sense. Since the 1980s, that transfer has always been meant to represent a proxy for what we would pay if we were an IOU, for property tax, for franchise fee, and return to shareholders. And so we tried to stay consistent with that. We did not start with a number. The $15 million number was what fell out of the methodology that we adopted.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth. It was just knowing that the target was to get to 70%. I was thinking, if you're trying to get to 70%, you'd have to, you work it out, that's about 17 or 20 million a year. And so
what I would say was the target was 70%, and yes, that's the next slide. It developed what that net debt reduction would be, but then there are components to that.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be an initial number, the reduction in the transfer, but there are 3 or 4 pieces to it, which we'll cover in just a second.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I would say, even in a different way, if it would need to be more than the GSC reduction would need to be more than it is if we were just trying to meet that target. So it takes more than just the GSC reduction to
So you're saying
70%.
It's the GFT plus the 28
Correct.
million off
Correct.
GNV also. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So here are the pieces to the to the question you just asked, Chair. First off, the General Policy Committee unanimously approved the proposals, and what those proposals resulted in, among other things, was that $315 million net debt reduction over the next decade. There are several components to making up that $315 million. The first component is, like we were just talking about, it's about $120 million reduction over the next 10 years in the payments that we will make to the general government, general revenue through the transfer. There's another $91 million in what we call organic debt reduction, and all that means is it's what we project we're going to pay down $91 million more in principal than we're going to issue in principal over that decade. The third piece was $76 million in incremental rate revenue generated by the recurring base rate increases in the electric system and the wastewater system from 22 through 27. And then finally, the last piece is the $28.2 million in O&M budget reductions that we committed to making as part of this process. And that's what we're here to talk about today with the detail of what makes up the first year of those cumulative $28 million cuts over the next decade. And it's worth noting that last week, I keep losing track of time, I guess it was last week when we met with the commission, they adopted a resolution that codifies this new government services contribution methodology.
Sorry, just a question. When you say codify, what does that mean when they're codifying? I mean, they can't force future commissions to do it. What does it mean to codify?
No, basically what it means is that it would take an action of the commission to reverse it. It's a resolution, so they would have to make a conscious effort, take a conscious item and approve that to reverse what they've done.
So basically next time it'll happen unless someone says, no, we're changing actively.
Yeah.
Have to step in.
Until a commission makes an overt act to change it, that formula methodology will stay in place.
Okay, thank you.
So the $28 million over the next decade, you average it out, it's about $2.8 million a year. For GRU to make those $2.8 million in O&M reductions is a little more problematic based on the fact that we exercise what we feel is a fair amount of budgetary fiscal prudence over the last several years. Between the budgets in 2019 and 2023, our O&M budget only increased about 1.8% from endpoint to endpoint. The full-time equivalents, or FTEs, over that same period only moved up about 1.64%, and the bulk of those were associated with when we converted former NACE employees who came on when the biomass plant came on. We converted them to GRU employees, and they became full-time equivalents. And one other piece down there, as you see at the bottom, the numbers that are on this matrix they come directly from our budget book. After the FY23 budget was put together, we actually eliminated 5 line worker positions, so that number now is actually at 927.
Are there any inflation adjustments in any of these projections?
No.
Okay.
No,
I
so
would
we
just
haven't
say-
kept pace with that.
Correct.
These are raw numbers. That's a raw jump, and so with inflation numbers over the last several years have been pretty hefty, so we've lagged significantly behind it, which goes to the point of it makes it that much more difficult for us to identify $3 million in cuts moving forward for what is a budget that we think is already pretty lean.
So even if you'd kept it the same, inflation's been eroding the O&M numbers already. Okay, thank you.
So the next 3 slides go to the question that was posed about some of the detail. This first one is our labor reductions. What you have up here in front of you is 20 currently unfilled positions that we are proposing not to budget for in 24 or 25. And when you add the fringe benefits onto the actual salary cost, it totals almost $2 million in labor cuts.
excuse me, Mark, so that I understand what you said, that these are people that are not on board today?
That's true. These are all vacant positions.
Okay, they're vacant today?
Yes.
Okay. I do have one question though.
Go for it.
And nobody ever steps up for IT. But there's one down here that it's a change management specialist. I don't know whether this is unfunded, whether that function is actually happening now, but it needs to happen. That's a quality control issue, and it's super important, or your IT goes to dust.
Right.
Somebody may be backfilling it today, and this may be an extra one, and you're limiting, and that's fine, but the function has to happen.
Correct. So, Mr. Chair, we do have others that will be filling that role, or we would outsource some of that activity if it's needed on a specific basis. So
who made the decision to freeze positions? Is that a GRU thing or a city thing?
yeah. So ultimately, it was my decision as a general manager. Worked with each department to look at areas where they could freeze the positions or unfund the positions. We're not necessarily committing to all of these positions for the 10-year time period. We had a pretty short window to make these decisions, but we are committing to them for the immediate time, and then we're looking at what a more kind of longer-term plan will be. But the department heads of each of these departments brought the reductions, but ultimately it was the general manager to decide.
So this is not that any vacant position is this that any vacant position is currently frozen, or do the managers come and say these are vacant positions that we could?
Right, so we have more vacancies than what's on this list. From the vacancy list, we identified these 20 positions to unfund.
Okay, thank you.
The next two slides are our non-labor O&M cuts. And the format here is across the top, you see the department or the profit center from which the cut's being made, and then on the left-hand side, you see the expense category where it's being pulled from. I won't go through these in detail. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. But they total about $1.4 million.
Yeah, I do have some questions. I guess just to kind of put a real-world picture on this, when we say we're taking $129,000 out of energy supply, contractual services, water, wastewater contractual services, $127,000, I mean, what does that entail? What is that actually cutting?
So, Mr. Goodman, do you want to address, Brett Goodman is our Chief Operating Officer, so he worked with those two operational areas, worked with all the operational areas to determine, again, the folks that are in the field, out in those areas that run these businesses are the ones that identify these reductions. And so Mr. Goodman worked with them to identify them, so I'll let Fred address that.
Yeah, Brett Goodman, Chief Operating Officer, GRU, is good question. Is what we try to do within each one of the operational areas, rather than try to take a broad brush, single brush approach, where could we find opportunities in each area? In the contract services, essentially it's taking things that we're trying to be proactive with and putting them off, and we'll probably be more reactive in the future. So there may be a lot of times we use the word reliability essential or reliability preferred. And so those reliability essential are the things that we need to do, but the reliability preferred is something, well, it's not essential yet, but we can put it off for a little bit of time, but it's eventually going to get to a reliability essential. So does that make some sense in terms of kind of prioritization of, we don't need to fix it yet, we've provided budget to be more proactive to repair this, but the contract services we could probably get by with and put that off in time. All these different areas have different kind of levers to, all these things are impactful to our operational units. And so it's, where are we going to come up with our cuts, and where can we show the least amount of impact possible? And so we went to each one of our operational areas and came up with, I would kind of a smorgasbord of different things, and came up with the total amounts in each area.
Are you all distressed about having to make these kind of cuts? I mean, like, for instance, I look at safety, and $30,000 isn't a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but anytime I see an entity cutting dollars from safety, that worries me. And you know, when it kind of sounds like we're talking about almost like deferring things to the future. I mean, I'm just wondering the level of distress that you all are experiencing with having to make some of these decisions and what this means.
So I'll give a high-level answer, and Mr. Goodman wants to follow up. So we submitted budgets of what we need to run the operation. Then these are reductions from that. So it is less dollars going toward providing the utilities than we had planned on. A lot of those reductions, as Brett kind of said, it's like it's increasing your risk some. We're not doing anything that's going to impact regulatory requirements or the safety of our employees. We're doing things that may increase the risk of a failure of a pipe. So a pipe that needs to be replaced, we're going to push it a little longer and see if it does fail, we'll fix it and we'll repair it. But you're just letting those things go a little longer. It's things like that. Some of the things are in safety and training, it's actually training. So there's some training that we're just going to put it off, out in time a little bit. We'll still do the training, but it'll be later in time that we'll do the training. So to answer your question, we did submit budgets. These are reductions from those budgets, but they're reductions that the managers and the directors felt comfortable with that add a little bit of risk, but not to the detriment of regulatory requirements or safety of our employees.
This was the first page of the non-labor O&M cuts.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, I do have some lights, thank you.
I almost got to the slide.
Going back to wastewater, you have $220,000 worth of chemicals, and do we have that's surplus of chemicals aboard? You're going to need it to.
Yeah, so let me address that one. That's a good one.
Yes.
So when we submit our budgets, we typically go out and try to get price information, but the time period is like we put these together in November to start getting information from our vendors on what that future price might look like. So at that time, the price escalation, and specifically in those types of commodities for chemicals, was very steep. The good news is over the course of when we asked for these, when we submitted our budgets to today, we started to see those escalation curves start to flatten out. And what we had projected as potentially a cost into the future back in November is less than what we think the market rate's going to be into FY24. So I want to assure you we're not stopping the chemicals. We're going to continue to have plenty of supply of chemicals to do that. It's more of a market adjustment for what we're seeing in the real term market for those particular chemicals, and that's why we wanted to correct that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Fletcher?
Yeah, I've got a question for Mark. Mark, could we go back to the slide where you had all the different positions there,
Sure.
please?
Well, maybe we can.
Yeah. We see all these job descriptions here, and we have testimony that we don't have something that's going to really be a catastrophe. But are there one or more of these that are really painful? I mean, really, shall we say, thin ice to dance on? Something that really, makes you stay up sleepless at night?
Causes hair loss, things like that.
I'll just speak for myself. The general manager will correct me, no doubt, but I don't think that there is any position up there that if you went to the department head or the area they'd be willingly giving up. These are what we try to do is prioritize the places where the impact would be the least, or where we had some backup where we could move over. None of this is. Let me back up again. The general manager mentioned we put our budgets together. Our operating department heads come to us with budgets that they say these are the dollars that we need to do the job that we need to do to deliver the service level that folks are used to. They brought that in, the general manager sat down with staff, we went through there and made the deletions that we needed to make in the areas that we felt would have the least impact on the organization. So I certainly wouldn't stand up here and say that there are any of these positions that we think, oh yeah, you know what, that's not something that we need, or that's something that's superfluous. What these represent are the ones where we feel will have the least impact on the organization, or we have sufficient depth in those areas to continue to provide the service. None of them are painless. None of what you see up here in any of these 3 slides is painless. But this is what we're tasked to do.
What comes to my mind is if you are implementing SAP like you are, and you really need a card-carrying SAP guru, I mean, we don't see that listed up here, but I'm just saying as an example, you really absolutely positively have to have an SAP guru, you know? You don't have anybody in that category, I guess, that you absolutely positively can't work without, I guess.
Yeah, and let me just add, Mr. Chair, so to put it in context a little bit, we have about 100 positions that are vacant at this time. We have about 10%, 12% vacancy. So this represents a portion of all those vacant positions. So this, there's still other vacancies. We're operating without these positions filled at the time. And what we're looking at is a short time period where we can continue to operate. And then we're looking at developing a longer term plan of whether we need these positions back, and there's other ways to reduce expenses. So I feel like we're all saying the same thing over and over. These things are not absolutely essential to run our business tomorrow, but they're also not just throwaway. Like they are useful. We do need these positions, but for a period of time, we're going to change the operation a little bit, maybe lower the level of service a little bit, take on a little more risk for a short period of time, and then develop a longer term solution.
And not violate whatever your minimum level of service
Correct.
is for each of the things you're trying to get done.
Correct.
And maybe to say it another way, GRU has consistently had a very high level of service, high reliability, and there's a cost that's associated with that. And if costs have to be reduced, there may be potential impact. Teresa?
Yep. I have one question on the LEAP program. There's 175,000 out of that, but isn't there an RO grant for a couple million for that? So how does that affect? Does that have to match? Does it have to be there? Is that going to affect?
Right. So no, it won't affect the ARPA dollars. Were $1.9 million over a 3-year period. That is not impacted. That's in addition to the LEAP dollars that we have in our regular budget. Plus, we had increased the budget, so the LEAP program was expanded to include a higher cost improvement per home, and so more expense per home, as well as open to renters and open to a broader economic demographic. And so with that, we actually had increased the budget, and this is kind of coming down from that already increased budget. So even with this reduction, we still have more in the budget than we have had historically.
And the county has a program to work with that too, right? They're doing it.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not familiar with that. So I mean, we still work with CWC, and they're doing some of the similar type of work, and then this LEAP work. And again, the dollars for LEAP, these are the dollars from GRU, but the ARPA dollars are on top of that.
So if I could follow up on that, because I also had a question about the LEAP. What does that mean concretely for the program?
Less homes.
Less homes.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you be specific? Do you know?
I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 less homes. I could probably do the math. I think their average is around $7,500 per home. So can someone divide 175,000 by 7,500?
Saying his reduction
Oh, he did.
was about 23.
23. There you go.
23 from what was the previous?
23 homes.
From 500?
From
Was it 500 they were going to?
No, from 100. I believe it was from 100.
But with the grant too. That.
Oh, yeah. So the 100 per year is from the GRU budget, and the grant is an additional. I'll do the math and get it in a second here.
While we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and see if we get to the next slide.
So this is just a summary of the labor and non-labor, and as you can see in the first year, what we're proposing is about $3.4 million. This is the execution of the commitment we made to the City Commission in that April 13th GPC meeting to do our part to affect that net debt reduction. So we didn't want to leave this presentation without acknowledging the fact that while we are delivering on that the first year of that $28 million cumulative reductions over the next decade, we acknowledge that there are there are challenges coming up over the next several years that are very likely going to require that we have additional iterations of O&M and capital cuts over and above this $28 million. You see some of them listed on the screen here. The results of the IRP process that you're going to hear about in just a few minutes, none of those are baked into this. We don't have any plant decommissioning costs. There's still decisions to be made about GRUCOM and how the role it's going to play in the organization. And we have some potential regulatory and legislative changes that we're still going to have to work our way through. So while we're talking about $28 million now, and it does kind of pale in comparison to the cuts that general government are going to have to make to put their piece in, we've got some more reductions that we're going to have to deal with coming down the road.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? From Mark? I don't, as someone asked, is this painful? I can speak. This case, I feel I can speak for you guys and say, yeah, it's painful, and I appreciate what you guys are doing under a difficult situation. Tim, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, when you look at the totals across the bottom, unfortunately, the biggest number is under customer support services, which is just unfortunate. That's working out that way. I hate to see the money, that big chunk of money, come out of LEAP. I don't know, if you just find cheaper envelopes and stuff, but it is what it is. Like you just said, it's painful, and we got to do what we got to do. But it'd be nice to keep the LEAP program where it was going.
Mr. Chair, I can answer the question. My back of the envelope works. So the ARPA dollars is getting around 100 homes with the ARPA dollars. The GRU budget associated with this will drop a little bit below 100 homes. So we're trying to get around 200 homes a year for the next several years. And like I said, it's a greater investment in per home than we have had historically. And it's open to a broader market as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the public or comments on this issue? Thank you, Mark. Oh, okay.
I didn't do my light.
Yes, my name is Donald Shepard. And what I wanted to ask is about the water incident issue of it. There's been a talk of raising the water price. I'm not seeing where yes, I do. And when that's going to take place. Prior city commission meetings, we had mentioned, or a person had mentioned about changing of the meters, that we're going to do that. I haven't seen anything about that or heard anything to the best of my recollection. So I'd like to hear, are we still going to follow through with that change of the meters and this coming year, or are we going to wait until the legislator makes their changes before we ascertain that ideal or act on that ideal.
Thank you, Don. Would you like to answer that?
Sure, sure. So on the first question, I believe you asked about rates. So wastewater rates are increasing. So in 2022, City Commission adopted a 5-year increase in electric and wastewater. So it's a 5% in wastewater, 3% in electric. So we are on path where that rate is continuing to rise each year. In terms of the AMI, we are continuing on track of replacing our water meters, gas meters, and electric meters. And so we've got about 20,000 plus meters installed at this time. We're going to continue to replace those meters as over the next two to 2.5 years, and we'll get probably more than 90% of the meters over that time period. We currently have, I believe it's 20,000 meters that are actually being read remotely, and routes, we're starting to stop some of the meter reading routes and actually collecting the data remotely, going into the billing system remotely, and working. So we'll continue to do that over the next 2.5 years. We'll get more and more of the routes that go directly into the billing system.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
The reason I'm asking that question is because there's some meters that are not been changed since the people own their homes. The woman that came to the meeting that lived over on 5th Street and on 7th Street, they've been there for over 100 years, and yet the meter nothing had been changed in all this time. Is there a intention to make a change to that?
Yes, so Mr. Chair, so all of the meters will be replaced as part of this project, both residential meters as well as commercial, the registers and commercial meters, to make them be able to communicate with the system. And so those will be new residential meters for electric, gas, and water. Will all be new meters, and they'll replace the existing meters that are there.
And what's the timeline to complete that project?
So probably over the next, or I would say over the next 2 to 2.5 years, we'll get 90% of the meters replaced. And then there might be some of the larger meters that are going to take a longer period of time, but the vast majority of the residential meters will be replaced in the next 2 years.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My next question was, if I still got time.
You don't, but go ahead.
I don't? Okay.
No, you don't, but go ahead. Go ahead and
Okay.
ask your question.
My next question was, we get this neighborhood pamphlet here and project that's going in over on the east side over there. And that there project, is the contractors been told or educated on what your plan is in that concept? Because I don't see nothing in the pamphlet that says that. That's agreed in the contract.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. I'm not sure. All right.
Can I bring this up?
Sure.
Sure.
This is what I'm talking about, and I didn't see anything in there. Same contract or anything. Let me go back to the mic.
Okay.
You know, I didn't see anything in that pamphlet, sir, that showed where this here renewment is gonna be done. And if I'm a project person that's gonna be the contractor to build this, I would wanna know from my services, GRU and water and that, before I go spending millions of dollars on this project.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we have a plan review process that any developer goes through where we coordinate both with the city and GRU on connecting our services. So any developer or contractor that is coming in to do a project is going to go through that process, and that will be coordinated through that process.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
You had something else, Jason?
Yeah, I'll wait till Nancy.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll wait till Nancy speaks. I had something, but you can go first. I'll go after you. You sure? So these are the kind of high-level decisions that I feel like the commission tells us about rather than asks us about. So my opinion doesn't mean a whole lot here. But that's okay because I have freedom to say it. I find this really distressing personally. I'm thinking about the orientation that I went to, all the different departments around GRU, and how many people I interacted with that expressed to me feelings of being under-resourced and understaffed previously, before this. And when I think about what this means for the future, I'm thinking, well, what does that mean in terms of being able to give GRU employees decent raises and being able to keep people, the good staff that we already have? What does it mean in terms of keeping people safe? I'm thinking about the sort of messages that I've taken from some of Claudia's presentations that debt reduction and keeping rates, stable shouldn't be done on the back of underinvestment in the utility. And I take that to include the people that run the utility. And this just feels like almost like the private equity firms do when they come in and they grab companies and hollow them out so that they can sell them. Not to say that I have any lack of trust in you guys. I mean, I think that you guys have been handed a difficult mission to reduce an already lean budget, and you're doing the best you can do with that. I trust everything that you guys are saying in terms of where to make these cuts. I just find it really distressing. And I kind of feel like this is one of those conversations that's happening with a gun to our head. And if the people that are holding that gun are making the argument that we're in the trouble we are because the city has taken too much money from GRU over the years, that part of that solution shouldn't be cutting GRU further to the bone. I just think that's a dangerous approach to addressing this issue. And further, I think that the people that are holding that gun to our head should have to make these kind of decisions if and when they get in power. I just hate to see us doing their job for them and making what could be potentially harmful and dangerous cuts to this utilities budget before they're even seated. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to say that I was really distressed as I read through this presentation leading up to tonight, and I imagine that you all might be as well.
Can I? So I appreciate the input. I want to be clear. I do not think these, and I would not approve dangerous and harmful cuts to our budget. So I want to be really clear about that. The workforce cut is about a 2% cut in the in those vacant positions. So we have 927 positions. This is 20 of those positions. These are vacant positions, and we do have another 8.5% vacant positions that we still have beyond this. I want to stress that we, although painful, these are things we do think we can continue to deliver our service and provide the services that our customers need. And I think that's an important point, that I would not characterize this as cutting to the bone, because we are committed and we're going to continue to provide the service that we're providing, and we're going to continue to develop more efficient methods and different ways to do things to find other efficiencies, and then over time be able to kind of recover from some of these reductions. So I think it's important to characterize this not as dangerous and harmful, but as things that we can do in the short term, and then as we develop more long-term solutions.
Just a second, John. Wait, Fletcher has this light on down here. You done? Okay. Go ahead.
I think it would be helpful looking forward if you over time, set standards for service levels, okay, and then you staff them to that, okay, and then going forward, you don't get yourself kind of in this kind of a situation. For example, how long should it be to answer a telephone? Okay, how long should it take to set a meter? How long should it take to do this kind of a task? Okay, take the top level things like that. I think you probably have these things here. Okay, and that's why you're able to say what you just said. Okay, I believe you because I think you know what's going on. But to be out there so everybody sees these kinds of things. You have kind of standards like this, and you follow them over time. Okay, and you say and you can then if you wish, benchmark yourself against others. What do you call it when you do these kind of things? It takes this company, what do you call it, an hour, what do you call it, to answer the telephone, or 5 minutes, or whatever that is. But the standards, what do you call it, these things don't happen overnight either. So you do them a little at a time. I think this management has a pretty good grasp of what those things are, and they're telling us that they think they can still do the job even taking these particular positions. But I think in the future, what do you call it, you can get away with, not get away with, but you get a more standardized, objective way, what do you call it, to come about a budget like that.
Thank you. And I just want to respond to what you were saying, Jason. I appreciate your comments on that. I guess my feelings may be a little different. These budget cuts were going to happen, whether by us or in the city commission or by this new authority. And so I would, as painful as it is, rather see it being done under our present, with the thoughtfulness that'll happen. Other people, we don't know who's going to be on this new authority, what agendas they'll have. So that's kind of the whole part of my hope is that by the cuts, I would love to see them come in and say, okay, you guys have you've taken JLAC's recommendations, which is the gun to our head, and done these things, and that they'll hopefully leave things alone for the most part, but could be wrong. But that's kind of where I come from. Fletcher, you back?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Have we had any feedback from any of the bonding agencies about their feeling about this program?
So I'm going to ask our chief financial officer. I was trying to give her the head nod.
I saw that, and I saw she didn't leap to the podium for this one.
So this Claudia Rasnick is our chief financial officer.
So, good evening. Let's see if that's good. We've been in contact with the rating agencies and are currently in discussions with them. Nothing to share as of yet. So, of the three, Moody's, Fitch, and S&P, Moody's, we talked to them a couple of weeks ago and provided some information, and they're performing I would say a review right now, but I don't have any information to share. Fitch was going to start their normal process in June, and so they've started that as well, and S&P as well. This is sort of the time of year where they come in and look at the utility anyway, so we'll be having those conversations with them. So at this point, I don't have anything to share, but they have started their review processes. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else before we move on to the next item, which is the...
Mr. Chair, Nancy, do you want to
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy.
Thank you, Robin.
Nancy Darren, Jason, you said a lot of what I was feeling. I just want to acknowledge all of you, and it's so unfair, and you work so hard, and you are still going to go, you're GRU, you're going to go beyond the extra, but I just hate what's been put on you on top of everything else. And that needs to be acknowledged. And we'll figure it out, and we'll do it, and you do it, and you'll keep your level of service above where it does. But it's taking a well-designed debt reduction strategy that was working, that also acknowledged when you do debt reduction and you're paying the bills right and you're on target and you're acknowledged for that, debt is the past. You don't put all your everything there. You have to live in the present. You're dealing with the future. And this plan that has been forced on us is saying you're going to put everything in the past and you're going to starve the present and make the future really uncertain in a time of incredible volatility and pressure on utilities and all of society and the globe. So I hope that, I know in the short term, we don't have the choice. We do have the gun to our heads. But I think, I hope that we can rally this community in acknowledgement and support finally, and that we all do everything we can to make this as short a term challenge and try to minimize the pain in any way that we can. So anyway, I just think that needs to be acknowledged. And it just, I'm so furious, and it just breaks my heart to see people treated this way. I just hate it when everybody's done so many good things. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Well said. Tim?
No, they can't say it, but we can.
Yep. And it needed to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just going to hold my tongue, but I just can't. And I agree with everything Ms. Darren said, and Tony, and all the rest of the GRU staff is doing a great job. But I just want to remind everybody that a lot of the stuff that's happening now, that we're doing now, the changes that we're making now, the former general manager had been saying needed to happen for a long time. And the city commission at the time, and the mayor at the time, nobody wanted to hear it. And so if we've got a gun to our head now, it's largely of our own doing. And I don't know that these people that are coming in are going to care that we're doing it now. And it makes me angry. And I just wanted to, wasn't going to say anything, but I can't not say it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to move on, if we're all good, with the update for the UAB on the IRP community engagement.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer, is going to give us an update. And again, just like the previous item, if I keep talking, I'll do his whole presentation, so I'll let him get started. And I'm going to step out for 1 minute. I'll be right back.
All right, Chair, members, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer for GRU. I'm here to give you an update on the Integrated Resource Plan. And for some people in the room, this will sound familiar because we just completed our community outreach earlier this week, and then a stakeholder advisory group meeting about 2 weeks before that. But the idea here is to really update you and kick off a process of continuous updates for the Integrated Resource Plan. We project this will go through the beginning or the middle of January 2024 is when we expect the final product, but we'll have a number of meetings in between. The idea is to bring those updates to the UAB or to the governing board or whoever it is, City Commission, throughout that process. So this is really the first step in that. The dates that were selected were really meant to coincide with meaningful updates in the process. What we didn't want to do is say, we're going to come every month, and then this month we say the same thing we did last month because nothing meaningful happened in between. So the breaks and the timing and the schedule is really meant to coincide to make sure that when we come back, there's something new to tell you and something new to discuss. But this really is a kickoff to that process and kickoff to the schedule. So this will look very familiar to our community meeting and also to our stakeholder meeting, but I'll get into a little more detail of what and why then. So that's a big picture of me. I will quickly skip past that one. So this is meant to be a collaborative process with stakeholder engagement and participation. We've partnered with ADG, which is Acuity Design Group, to help us translate, to help us create materials, to help us gather information and collate information for the community, for governing boards, for stakeholder groups, to make sure that the conversations we're having are meaningful to them, to the audience, but also that the feedback that we're getting is being collated into the process. So again, the timing of these meetings is meant to allow time for that feedback to be collated and then moved and make changes into the modeling and the process itself. So when we look at our stakeholder participants, we put together what we call a stakeholder advisory group. And it is made up of representatives from different organizations across the community. And those community organizations are diverse on purpose because we really wanted to make sure we caught the feedback of the entire community. So as you see on this list, we have folks from the Alachua County School Board. We have folks from Santa Fe and UF. We have religious organizations there. United Way, the Chamber of Commerce will be added into this process. We also have the sustainability directors or managers from the city of Gainesville and also Alachua County. Autobahn and Sierra Club, and the large customers and small customers. So the idea is really to get a cross-section of the community and get that feedback to allow us to bring them up to speed and educate them, because honestly, most people in the community don't know what an IRP is or what's entailed in it. So to get meaningful feedback, you have to kind of educate and bring them along in that process. So that's one goal, and the other goal again is to get that feedback back from them.
Can I ask a question about this, Pete?
Absolutely.
Do I understand correctly from the previous meeting that this list of stakeholders has to be revised due to sunshine concerns? Is that?
Well, and I talked with Tony about this a little bit. I was thinking, I can't be on the committee. So I am not participating in the meetings because Teresa is in the meetings. Now, it could be as of July 1st, I may be able to participate in the meetings.
Okay, I see.
But as long as I'm on the UAB and she's on the UAB, I felt and agreed that it was appropriate for Teresa to be there as a major, representing the school board as a major customer of GRU. And we're getting our updates here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add is, part of what Eric's doing tonight and we plan to continue going forward is as we do stakeholder meetings to come here and do updates, similar material that was covered there and inputs and outputs and things of that nature to the Utility Advisory Board.
Thank you.
Okay, a little bit about our service territory. You guys have probably seen this before. This board has probably seen it before, but the light pink outline is the city of Gainesville city limits. The red line is the service territory, the electric service territory for GRU. You'll see a carve out in the middle, and that represents the main campus of the University of Florida. Of course, we don't serve them with electric service. But we do serve all the ancillary facilities that support UF and are spread out throughout the community. I'm not going to go into too much detail. This board understands how this works. We have generation. It steps up to transmission, transferred around the city, and then step back down to deliver to customers and homes and businesses and so forth. Our generation assets are spread throughout the city. We have one at Deer Haven, obviously on the north side of town. We have Kelly and SAC. And then we also have on this map the Sand Bluff solar site that is lined out. And that is towards the south side of our service area. And again, that's a 20-year contract meant to be operational December of 2024. I get the question, so I'll go ahead and answer it. As everyone asks, well, that seems a really far away. But when you look at and superimpose that other map that we actually have a transmission substation right here, the Parker Road substation. So it's about 4.5 miles from that site. So effectively, they'll build the solar here, run an underground transmission line, connect to our substation there, and of course, we can feed it anywhere in the system from that point.
And I'd just like to point out, a lot of people have this idea that there are huge transmission losses, that the voltages you guys are running. I don't know if you want to speak to the losses specifically, but you can move electricity around. It's not.
Yeah, typically the reason why we use transmission is to lower the amount of losses that we have. Typically on our system is less than 2% losses that we calculate or at least factor into our delivery service. So there are some, but they are small.
Okay, thank you.
Again, more about the transmission and distribution system. Our transmission system, because it's high voltage, it's above 138,000 volts. It's managed or overseen from a regulatory perspective by FERC and NERC and also FRCC. We have, most of our system is 138,000 volts. It is basically a loop around the system with one radial that's 230,000 volts, and that's our connection to Duke. So we have two connections to Duke Energy Florida, one there, one at Idlewild, and then we have a connection with Florida Power and Light. We have 11 distribution substations. We have obviously 3 primary generating stations and roughly about 1,500 miles of distribution lines that run throughout the city. And the majority of those, about 62% of those, are actually underground. So that adds some resiliency to our system as well. So let's talk about CO2 a little bit and CO2 emissions. Since 2020, we've basically reduced our CO2 emissions by about 55% since that time. Part of that is due to DHR and the acquisition and the building of that plant. Another part of that is the conversion of Deerhaven 2 to be able to burn natural gas as a primary fuel source versus just coal. And so the combination of those have contributed to that, but you can see the decline actually started well before that. So just changes and modifications to our system have helped us move and emit less carbon as we move through time. For our customer growth, we roughly have 100,000 customers right now. We expect, projecting over the next 10 years, to grow by roughly 10%. Our growth rate in load and customers is a little under 1%, and believe it or not, that's a little high for the electric industry on average. Most of the systems are either very flat or actually negative. When we look at that growth, Florida is the second fastest growing state in the nation, according to the last census. So lots of people are moving here every day. And so that is contributing to that growth. But it's also dampened by the advent of LED lights, new appliances, new homes. As they build these new homes to house all the people moving to town, those are obviously up to the latest standards and so forth. So that's why you see a very modular, conservative growth there. So, looking at our peak demand and firm capacity resources, I know there's a lot of lines here, but each one of these lines represents a generating unit. The size of the line represents or corresponds to the maximum output of that generating unit. So if you look from left to right, you'll see obviously the large yellow line is Deerhaven 2, which is roughly 250 megawatts of capacity. You see Kelly CC1 down here in the light gray. You see DHR in this blue color. We've actually represented the solar plant when it comes online in 2025 in the green, and so it actually rolls on and rolls off within the initial study period of this IRP. So the stack, as we'll call it, literally here, represents our capacity and our ability to meet our capacity based on the generation that's installed. When you look at this black line, this is our projected peak of our system, so maximum required output throughout any given year. You'll also see a red line above that. We're required by law to plan for a 15% reserve margin above our expected peak. So effectively, that red line is our target. You can see as we move out into time, we're okay here for a little while, but then once we get to 2032, all of a sudden, we're not meeting or above that red line anymore. We're not even meeting our peak in 2032. And that is contributed to by the retirement of Deerhaven 1, this light line here, light blue, in 2027, and obviously the retirement of Deerhaven 2 that's scheduled for the end of 2031. So if you want to talk about an IRP and what this IRP answers, the question that is answering is, how do we fill this gap? There's a gap here in resources versus a load requirement. What's the best way to fill that gap? That's effectively what an IRP is answering.
Yes,
sir.
Part of the conversation, if I understand correctly from previous times we've talked about this, is an acknowledgement that black line that represents peak demand is not a law of nature and that we can have an impact on that. Mm-hmm. And so conservation as a possible resource in addressing that gap is an important part of this conversation, correct?
Absolutely. So chair, members, that is an important part of the conversation. I do want to say, though, that this line does represent what we think is the load forecast going out, taking into consideration all of those things like demand side management, like energy efficiency. When we looked at DSM programs across the nation, large and small utilities, the impact on the peak overall was very small, less than 5%, in most cases less than 1%. So you're looking at a 0.5% to 1.5% change in your peak output for DSM, for conservation, and so forth. So we were a little surprised by that, but that information was consistent. And actually 2% is very, very high. So when you look at the impact of that line, we do have some control. We can incentivize some conservation. We can do those things, but the overall impact is not dramatic, right? It's really incremental, and it's a small increment on top of that.
Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you're incorporating that already, what you think is gonna be. Does that also include, are you also incorporating in that, things that we can do to affect peak, load as the, greater consumer control with smart metering rolls out? Is that also being factored into this?
So that is a part of it. So when we go to look at this IRP, what will happen is we will factor in a percentage of demand side management, customer control, energy efficiency. We'll kind of roll it in, right? And we'll say, assuming we can get that reduction up to 5% per se, right? Based on the value that comes out of the IRP, then we'll then dig into more detail and say, what programs can we put into place to reach those? Some of them will be for, say, time of use rates. Some will be incentivizing charging like electric vehicles off peak. We'll have to build how we fill that gap. The IRP will answer what is the value of that gap and of that reduction. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, John.
2 questions. Is there any consideration given or thought given to what the impact of the EVs are going to be? Number 1. And number 2, what is the thought, what do you call it, for the push, what do you call it, at the federal level to shut down gas and things like that? And would that come back as an electric, what do you call it, load that we'd have to pick up?
So that's a great question. So chair members, we are factoring in the growth or expected growth of EVs. What we've done is we've gone out to different aggregators, Wood, McKinsey, different forecasters in the market that do these forecasts. Effectively, what we've come up with is kind of a middle of the road based on those forecasts. And that middle of the road is roughly a 30% growth.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry. 30% growth in EVs year over year. So if you look
growth
at
in EVs or growth in your load forecast?
Growth in the number of EVs.
Okay.
Which translates into a certain amount of growth. I'm sorry. I might need to grab some water. So when we looked at that, if we have roughly 1,800 EVs in the county today, 30% growth through 2040 only incrementally increases our load up to that point, right? You do hit a point where there is an inflection, but it's somewhere out further in that curve. We can't tell whether it's 2040, 2045. By the best indications, it's going to be somewhere out there where you see that significant exponential growth happen, right? We're also balancing that with the increase in rooftop solars and personal customer reduction demands. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
He just needs some good GRU water and he'll be okay.
It's healing. Thank you. And so what we've done is really taking the expected growth over that time. We've taken the impact of what we think rooftop solar and customer-based renewables are going to be and basically melded those together. You've got EVs that are pushing that curve up, and you've got solar and rooftop solar that are pulling that curve down. And the mix of that is what we're showing as our base forecast. The next question is obviously, well, what if we miss it? Well, some of the sensitivities are going to be, okay, you take this load forecast, we're going to increase it by 20%, right? What if we're off by 20%? Okay, what does that look like? What if we're over by 20%? What does that look like? So it contemplates and sets those sensitivities for that variance that could be there, right? No one knows exactly what the future is going to look like with EVs and the conversion and electrification. We can have some guesses and we can take our best guesses, but those sensitivities really kind of cover what we miss effectively.
Did you say that maybe I was hearing things, McKinsey?
Wood Mackenzie is one of the
they have 300% growth.
Over a period of time.
Yeah, and for the country.
Right.
Right.
Right. So over a period of time, that's
and they're talking about a lot of places that have a lot of manufacturing and everything else, which
right. So the average of what we saw was roughly 30% year over year, now through 2040. So if you apply that to Alachua County, then that's what that looks like. We also, there is an NREL tool that we can't just add the additional EVs to the peak, right? We recognize they're going to be charging different times during the day. So it's not right to just add them onto the peak. So we actually took an NREL tool that kind of forecast what they think the load will look like with EVs and proliferation and applied that to the load curve as well. So it gives you the benefit of, well, some of these are going to be charging overnight. Maybe a quarter of them are going to be charging during the day, but they're not all going to be charging at the peak. So it's not right to add them to that number. Does that make sense? So we tried our best to see what is the overall energy requirement and how is that load going to be distributed through time to come up with the load forecast.
Fletcher, you have the light on? Do you have a light on?
Yeah, I've got a question on your graph here. In the last IRP, we showed the termination of 5 power plants during the planning horizon. Here, you're really only showing one, the yellow one, which is ST2, is it not? Yeah. But all the others, the blue, the green, the gray, and brown, all continue right on out. Why don't you have the other 4 shown as terminating here in this graph?
So when you look at this, we actually do show terminations of those different ones. So we'll start here with Deerhaven 1 is retiring in 2027. You'll see some of these smaller boxes, CT1 and CT2, which are these dark bands here, they actually retire in 2026. So you don't see them continue on through the band. When you look at Deerhaven 2, that's an obvious one. And we actually show, which we didn't show last time, the retirement of Deerhaven, of DHR after 30 years of operation in 2043. And so those are all contemplated when we go through this. When you look at CT3, actually, it shows that retirement in 2046, which is expected to be 50 years after it was put in service in 1996. So as you go through time, you do see these scheduled retirements roll off of that generation stack.
See, there's some of the small ones, they're kind of hard to see on this graph.
Yeah, it's a lot of numbers and bars kind of squished together there, but it does represent that change.
I have a couple of questions here real quick, and I don't know if you know. So when I look at FP&L, their peak versus on peak versus off peak is about triple. Their peak on peak is about triple off peak. I don't know if you've seen any studies of to Jason's question about demand, customer demand management, whether that had any kind of significant increase. I mean, that's quite substantial.
It is, and one of the companies that we looked at for demand side management was FPL. And if I don't quote me, but I remember their DSM program, the implementation, I think they were one of the highest at about 1.5% of reduction of peak.
So triple the pricing resulted in about 1.5% of the change. Interesting, very interesting. Now on here, you're showing the solar PPA. Does that meet any of the needs of FERC because it's a non-consistent?
Not really.
So when we're saying we're above the red line, they're not going to be looking at the solar in that.
It'll only, when we go to do capacities, it will only count for a portion of that. So we count roughly 35% of the total capacity of solar to actually meeting a firm need. So when we get through with that, it'll be in the 25, 30 megawatt range that will actually count towards firm capacity for planning.
Okay, so they do. So FERC does allow some.
They allow some, but it's roughly the capacity factor a little bit above.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So next is if this graph is showing you graphically what an IRP is answering, what question it is answering, then talking about an IRP is really the definition. So it's a standard practice within the electric utility industry, and it's specific in our case to GRU in Gainesville, and a roadmap to how we meet our future power requirements. It factors in a number of things like economics, reliability, environmental responsibility. All those things will be factored in as we go through and create these scenarios. So we have it shown really as a six-part process, and this little, the blue guy, I'll call it the blue man. The blue man represents kind of where we are right now, setting our goals for the IRP. The next step is inputs and assumptions, and we expect those to be done by June 1. And so the next stakeholder advisory group meeting will be talking about all of our inputs and assumptions and what they mean and why. And then after that, you talk about your resources that you need, and you evaluate all your alternatives to meet your needs at that point. You come up with a preferred resource plan, and then from that, you develop an action plan to actually go do something and go implement something. This process is meant to look like a winding road, but we started just like we talked about with the demand for electricity. You got to know what you're trying to hit and how big that gap is before you can decide what's the best way to fill it. So the next is looking at natural gas prices and those forecasts, any market and regulatory requirements, renewable energy standards, or requirements that we want to, or constraints we want to put into the model. Customer expectations. The customer expectations have shifted a lot over the past really 5 years and really decade has shifted dramatically. And how do we incorporate that? As well as taking a look at emerging technologies that may be available. So we've talked about some of these before, but IRP considerations, the things you have to take into account. Obviously, number one is existing generating resources, when those generating resources are expected to retire and no longer be available. You look at your demand and energy forecast, customer growth, which we've already talked about, looking at electrification in that process, looking at electric vehicles and what impact they have on your demand, customer-sided renewables, and then demand-side management, energy efficiency, and also conservation. Again, we're talking about natural gas and coal and biomass fuel projections, any new generating resources, both renewable and conventional, and then also the emissions of CO2 or overall environmental attributes of each one of those options.
I'm sorry, just when you say the emissions of CO2, is that meant as a surrogate for climate change impact?
Right. So, Chair members, what we want to do that we didn't quite do last time is include an overall emissions profile for every scenario and every answer. So that'll be one of the factors that we can compare to the different scenarios between each other, right? So they'll look different, but we'll also have an overall emissions over that time period as another comparison factor.
And so when you say overall emissions, are you looking at a cradle to grave environmental impact of the various options?
Chair members, no. It'll just be the direct emissions from the stack of those generating units.
Any reason why?
Well, it gets into a philosophical debate at that point of what we can and can't control, right? And so we know that once natural gas gets to us and how it combusts and the efficiency, we have direct control over that, sure. Emissions controls and so forth. There are many things that are outside of Gainesville, outside of the supply chain, outside of those things that are required, that bring those to us. But we're looking at what we can control as far as direct emissions go. So.
And I guess the counterpoint to that, though, is if you say, using natural gas as your example, if you choose to burn this much natural gas, if the goal is to measure and control environmental impact, to say, I'm not going to consider things that happened outside of when I held on to it, doesn't seem like you have a goal that's really effective, or it's not a great objective function in my mind.
We can go through the exercise, but here's the way that I see that. We have direct control over the emissions that come out of the stack. If we burn more or less natural gas, you can add a bogey on top of that of here's the overall emissions that come from transporting all of that gas to us, assuming a 2% leak rate across the entire system, all those things. You can add a bogey, but that's an exercise you can do at the end. This model is really focused on the emissions and the combustion rate of what the energy sources or the combustion sources we have within our system.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, John.
I noticed you have solar PPA down there.
Is that would that be considered a summer peak firm capacity?
I'm not sure where.
Oh, I'm looking at, I'm
Previous
sorry.
slide,
Kind of what I was asking about earlier with the.
I'm way back,
Keep going back.
Keep going
I'm way
back?
back over to this over here.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I was,
It's a similar.
Yeah, so when we do that, all of that capacity won't be considered firm. It'll just be a portion of that capacity. So between 30 and 35% will be considered firm capacity. So we may say it's a 75 megawatt, unit, but only 30 megawatts will be added to the firm count of how much generation we have on site. Okay. So looking at the approach and the methodology here, we've talked a lot about the forecast, the demand, the energy, the fuel, the economics. We've also talked about the existing resources, gathering the cost and operating data. And a lot of what will come from that is not only just the dispatch power price, but also the overall fuel price over the life of that unit. We'll capture the fixed and variable O&M over that unit. We'll capture the capital cost of building that. So when a model selects a generating source, all of those costs will be captured. So when we compare the different scenarios, it will be all inclusive of those things. So once you identify these things, you look at identifying the resource need, including any reliability criteria that we're required to meet. We have two sides of being able to meet those needs. So one is the supply side and generation on the ground and putting out megawatts. The other is demand side and reducing that overall requirement of energy that you need. You'll evaluate your alternatives and then you'll develop recommendations from there. An IRP is a very technical process. It's a lot of technical terms, and it's very important that when we have conversations and even updates that we all are talking the same language, right? So one of the things that we are doing and that will be posted is an IRP glossary of terms. So when we talk about peak demand and reserve margin and optimization, we can go back to that definition and we all know and agree on what that means. And so that's helpful not only for conversations, but also for education of the public who won't be familiar with most of these terms. And I may not have mentioned it, but we're going to keep a running log of all the resources, updates on the website for everyone to access, gru.com/IRP. And you'll be able to see all the presentations, some of the supplemental data, the conversations, this glossary of terms, all those things will be available. So this board is very familiar with this and the mission, and the mission of GRU is to provide safe, reliable, competitively priced utility services in an environmentally responsible way in a manner that enhances the quality of life in our community. So obviously we're a multi-service utility. We're the 5th largest in Florida, serving roughly 100,000 customers. And we have different numbers of customers in electric, natural gas, water, wastewater, and telecom. And one of the things that I get asked when I say I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer is, what the heck does that mean? Tell me what is that exactly? So when you think about it and define it just from the dictionary, it's the ability to maintain or support a process continuously over time. When you boil it down and translate it a little more, it's meeting your current needs without bankrupting the folks coming after you and hamstringing them from being able to meet their needs, right? And when you boil it down even more, it goes back to stewardship. And stewardship is basically care. It's taking care of something. We like to say and we like to think that we are good stewards of the things that are important to us, our time, our money, our family. We want to be good stewards of them. So that means we make decisions that are in the best interest and preserve the life and health of whatever it is we're caring for. And that's effectively the job, right? It's looking at 3 pillars, which is people, economics, and environmental, and making balanced decisions for the overall care of the utility, considering all of those things. It doesn't like me. There it is. So, as we talked about, it's kind of a balancing act. If you go to make a hard decision and you only have to consider one thing, then that decision is fairly straightforward and easy. As soon as you start to have to factor in multiple things in those decisions, the complexity of that decision gets harder, right? If we, for instance, just make things purely on economic basis, well, that makes things very easy, right? But if we're going to pollute and there's a lot of emissions that go along with that over above and beyond what's necessary, okay, then that changes the dynamic, doesn't it? It changes that decision. So looking at this is a balance act between all of them. We're looking at people, which is obviously customers. Everything that we do as a utility has a direct impact on our customers. It also affects our employees. If we make crazy decisions and they impact our employees in a positive or a negative way, right? If people end up losing their job because of the things that we've talked about or the bad decisions we've made, then we have to factor that into what we're doing. We have an effect on the overall community as a whole, so we have to make sure we're cognizant of that. We also can't ignore the economics and the fiscal responsibility that goes along with running a utility and running a business as a whole. We've talked about JLAC, we've talked about debt, we've talked about long-term financial stability, and that has to be a factor as we go through this IRP process. And obviously the last one mentioned, but not the least, is we have to talk about environmental as well. There are a lot of people that work at GRU. There are a lot of people that are in this community that are very concerned about the environment, and they should be. But GRU works hard every day to make sure that we meet and or exceed all of the environmental regulations that we have to do. We can't just throw that out the window. It's not something that we can just forget, right? So when you look at all those three factors, it's something that you have to add balance to. You can't hyper-focus on one, and you can't ignore any of them. So I say that to say it's not going to be an easy decision, and we're not going to make this decision based on one thing alone, but all of these things are important, and all of them have to be factored in. So let's talk a little bit about net zero. You guys know about the resolution and the 2045 net zero resolution that was put in place in October of 2018. We currently have roughly 140 megawatts of renewable energy on our system, 18.5 megawatts of solar fit or solar feed-in tariff, roughly 14 megawatts of net meter solar, and that number is increasing week by week. 103 megawatts of biomass, and roughly 4 megawatts of landfill gas. As of last year, of our total energy requirement, we met roughly 30% of that requirement with renewable energy. And that is by far the highest in the state. No one else is in double digits. And so that's something to be proud of. When you look at renewable utility scale options available here in Gainesville, we basically have two. We have solar and we have biomass. So moving forward to these net zero goals, we've got to recognize that solar is going to play a significant part in that. And coupled with the solar, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to the reliability aspect of that as well, because of the intermittency that goes along with that. So why are we doing it now? An IRP is really a strategic look at future generation, future needs, and how you're going to meet those needs. We perform it periodically, so the goal is every 3 to 5 years we'll be going through this process again. And periodically allows you to do a number of things. It allows you to update what you're looking at. It allows you to update the pricing and the available technology that's there, and be able to capture any new technology that's come to market and either greater efficiencies or something that just wasn't available the last time around. So the last IRP was completed in 2019. We ran 15 unique scenarios from that IRP, and all the common recommendations were completed. So when we look at those 15 different scenarios, there were two things that came out in every single one of them. If it only come out in one, you may be able to ignore it, but something that comes out in every single scenario is something we should probably go do, which is what we did. The first was repower the steam generator at the Kelly plant, the combined cycle. That was completed in 2021. And the second part of that was a build up to 80 megawatts of solar. And that was the Solar Bluff contract that we just, or the Origis deal that was just signed. And so those are the two things that were in every one of those scenarios. But no long-term path was selected out of that process. So the idea is that we have to make sure that this time we get a clear path forward so that we can take some action to meet those goals and fill those gaps. Since 2019, there's been significant changes in pricing with a lot of things, inflation and added on to that, and also available technology. The energy landscape has shifted dramatically. We were sitting here talking about EVs and when they're going to come into play. Back in 2019, there was Tesla and maybe a couple of other, EVs that were available. Now you've got every major manufacturer, car manufacturer, has put out a plan of how they're going to transition their fleet to electric. And so that's changed the landscape dramatically. So we're trying to factor all of those changes in, which is the benefit of doing this periodically and not just doing it once and waiting 20 years to update it again. So we're planning that this IRP will help inform our decisions, how we fill those gaps, how we meet our energy needs going forward, and hopefully come to a plan of action that we can then go execute to make sure that we can meet the needs now and also in the future. And I think that's my last slide.
All right. Any questions, comments?
It doesn't like me.
Hey, Jason.
I was just curious, either from your perspective or from Member Sperlingwood's perspective, how the first meeting went in terms of like public participation in particular.
Chair members, I'll actually defer to Member Sperlingwood.
It was a very good meeting. It was a lot of input from everybody and a lot of questions. I think it's a good group of people to have together.
And were there folks from the public there that were not part of the stakeholder group, or was it just the stakeholder group?
Not really. No, I don't think so. Maybe one.
Yeah, there was, chair members there, this stakeholder group is meant to be a closed group, so it's not open to the public. And so we're having separate public meetings for that as
Because it
well.
was not, that's why I couldn't participate, because it was not a public.
Oh, okay. So I was seeing emails from GRU that was talking about the IRP process and what I thought were public meetings about that process, but that was not what just happened.
Correct. So the first stakeholder meeting was at the end of April, where that group on the second slide or third slide got together. We have a separate process for the public that we're going to basically give the same information to and kind of move them along, except they're not quite as in depth and they're a little more spread out through the process. So that's the goal with those.
And
so, just real quick, all the days are running together for me. We just had the public meeting Tuesday of this week. Okay, that's what I couldn't remember. It was this week. So this week we had the actual public outreach meeting that is in addition to the stakeholder meeting.
Okay, so two questions about that. One, I had written to Robin about thinking I was writing about the same meeting, the stakeholder meeting and the public meeting. Do I understand correctly that members of the UAB should also not attend the public meetings?
So, chair members, that is correct, and Bianca can probably add more detail to that. But effectively, there can be no time when two members of a Sunshine Board can be in the room, whether they mean to talk to each other, whether they meant to show up in that same place or not. Right. So
let me just expand. So you can't be in the same room in a meeting with a topic that might come before the board.
Correct.
Which the IRP is that topic. The board could talk about having just one of you all attend the public outreach meetings. If you want to coordinate that, you all could choose to do that.
So how did the public outreach meeting go?
Chair members, I thought it went well. We did have, I believe, 10 to 15 members of the public come out. We took the full hour and a half time. We covered a lot of the information that you see here, and there was a lot of questions and feedback, and able to interact with the customers that showed up. So, in my opinion, it was a good first outreach. And when we get more information and updated information, we'll have another one probably late June, early July time period. So, I think the first one went well.
And just so you know, the first one was basic information. going over definitions, what things mean, things like that. It was to get everybody having the same baseline to move forward.
So I do want to, if I could have the overhead here, I do want to show kind of some of the dates that we have and the topics. So the first stakeholder meeting really covers kind of IRP 101, right? What is an IRP? Why are we doing it? Talking about a glossary of terms. The second stakeholder meeting, which is scheduled for June 6th, will have the types of variables. So supply side, demand side variables, sources and methodologies for those variables, and any base cases. So load forecast, existing resources, supply side options, economic parameters. We want to make sure we're all on the same page with those before we go start pressing buttons. The third meeting is really the variables for sensitivity. So there'll be kind of a base case, and then you'll look at, well, how does that impact the other variables and the other sensitivities? So we expect that we're going to throw some wild things at the wall in one of these scenarios. What if we take all of this emerging technology and just kind of pick a date of, yeah, it'll be available then, and kind of throw that out there to see what the impact is. And then we'll study a high fuel cost case and a low fuel cost case, high load forecast, low forecast. We will probably pull in a scenario that factors in some nuclear and what that looks like in the late 2030s or early 2040s, right? So this is our chance to kind of see what we want to put into it and kind of compare those based on what we know right now. So the fourth meeting is scheduled to do base case and sensitivities and review the modeling and talk about what those items are coming out of the model at that point. And then the last one that we think we'll have is in January 10th, and that's going to be reviewing the results, any modeling refinements that have to go into it, summarizing any types of supply side and demand side activities that we intend to pursue or implement. So as I said, again, we'll implement a certain amount of reduction due to DSM. We'll have to develop a detailed plan on how we actually get that reduction and what programs help us get there. The community outreach meetings are on a similar schedule, but just less of those. So the first one we had was Tuesday, 5/9. The next one's going to be July 26th, where we will cover all of the activity up until that point. And then the last one will be again on that same date, on January 10th of 2024. To kind of finalize the results and decide what we want to, and talk about what we want to do going forward. Now, these aren't going to be the only times that we'll interact with the public. There'll be other opportunities as they come up, either, city fairs, events that GRU is holding. There'll be surveys, electronic and paper, that are available on the website to be able to provide feedback during this time. So the idea, again, is to get a broad outreach to the community, to stakeholders, to different groups across the city, and then bring that information back so they can participate in the process.
Jason, anything else?
Well, yeah, just so along the lines of what Tony was saying, since you all decided at the last meeting that you would have one person that would attend the stakeholder meetings, there's less of the public outreach meetings. Do we want to decide a person to attend those, if there's anybody interested? So
when is the next?
July 26th?
The next stakeholder meeting is July 26th.
Which, who knows, maybe we won't even be around at that point. But I just say it because I would like to attend these meetings, the public ones, but not if other folks are interested in going, then I wouldn't, I would defer.
Well, we could talk about that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Make that decision, if that's all right.
All right, that sounds good.
Can I understand the philosophy behind that? Why wouldn't you want to have this group understand what the actual stakeholders and or the people that are public really want?
Just because of sunshine. The sunshine.
What does the sunshine law actually say? That I shouldn't understand what do you call it, what the public wants?
It says that one of us can be there, but not two of us.
The thing.
Oh, you're worried about you and I talking about
Exactly.
it.
Right.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So like Teresa's at the stakeholder meeting, and maybe Jason could go to the public, but Jason and I, or Teresa and I, can't go to a meeting.
They don't want us making decisions.
And I asked the question, what if I just sit there and don't say anything? And they said, nope, can't do that.
What if you're on Zoom? How do they stop you from doing it?
I've dropped at a meeting, Jason and I were almost at a meeting the other day, and I saw him come on, and I dropped off.
It's
Your responsibility to make sure that you're not in the room, including with somebody that's on a board that you're making decisions through.
If it's something that we believe is going to be addressed before the UAB. Fletcher, I know you had your light on.
It's incredibly stupid.
It is.
I'm sorry.
But I might grease your palm so you vote my way.
I have a little itty bitty question. You're showing the
3.8 megawatts from gas from power supplies. I've never seen that number before in all the work that we've done since I've been on there. I've never seen that referred to. Where is that location and what is that? Or is there a name for that facility or something?
Sure. So Mayor, I'm sorry, wrong meeting. Chair,
Please
members.
don't push that on.
Sorry, I apologize.
Especially this year.
So that is it's landfill gas that we purchased through a contract that will actually end at the end of this year, December of 2023. It is located at a landfill in Marion County, and it takes the methane that's being collected from the landfill and runs it through basically a rice engine and creates power from that. So they are sending us that power via the transmission system, and so that flows into our system that way.
And you're saying that's going to come to an end?
That contract ends December 31st of 2023.
I've never seen that before.
Thank you. I do have one thing. You asked about what was in the language of the bill, and this relates to the IRP because this is going to happen well after. I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this new board's in place, so I wanted to read 7.112. So the statute is in general very vague. I find this the most distressing non-vague section that they have in there. Limitations on utility directives. The authority and the CEO/GM in making all policy and operational decisions over the affairs of the utility system as contemplated under the provisions of this act shall consider only pecuniary factors and utility industry best practice standards which do not include consideration of the furtherance of social, political, or ideological interests or appropriate pecuniary factors and utility industry best practices are those who solely function the fiscal and financial benefit of the utility system and the customers. So you were talking about having to do a balancing act. This says there's going to be a lot less balancing, so environmental issues beyond regulatory requirements are out. Money to low income is out. Anything. I mean, it's pretty clear to me a lot of things are going to be out. And I don't mean this as political grandstanding. I'm just thinking as you're developing this IRP, are you developing it with this, will you be developing it with this in mind? Because because you can come up with all kinds of great suggestions, but state statute says these are the only things that can be considered in the planning for GRU.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, what I would say is that's one of the areas we're trying to flesh out precisely what that means. I think we're continuing on the path just like Eric described as we go through the IRP process. And the IRP process in itself is going to create numerous scenarios for us to look at and to evaluate. So I would say we're not changing off of that course at this time, and we're trying to continue to understand precisely what some of the language means in the bill.
Again, I'm not meaning to grant. I just want to make sure that you don't want to spend a lot of time and effort coming up with something and being told that's a violation of the state statute, so you can't proceed with that. It seems in direct conflict to, like the 2045, net zero goal is kind of out the window by this language, I would assume. But so we'll see where we go. Anything else before we move on? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move in. Normally we'll have public comment after each thing, but we're right into public comment now, so let's go ahead and do public comment.
I have several questions. My first one is there going to be a, what do you call it, an RFP or a public note on what the gentleman had mentioned of itemized individual steps towards the new plan that you have showed tonight? is there gonna be like an itemized thing there? If I'm saying it right.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you asking whether there's going to be a time for,
Yeah,
for,
like
for
a-
public input on the
Yeah.
IRP? Is that the question?
Yeah,
And after the meeting, I'm sure Eric could provide you with the dates where you can go to the public comment meetings.
okay.
There's one coming up in July, I think you said was the next one.
July 26th.
July 26th.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd like to have a copy of what we talked about earlier of a governmental plan of, is it Democrats planning this, or is it Republicans planning this, so that we have a ideal as a public, whether we're Democrat or Republican, where we go or where do we fit in this outlook of this utility scenario. Has that been designated or not?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not.
The question is that, is this a Democratic thought issue items, or is this a Republican? Or is it just general comment?
I would say it's nonpartisan.
Okay, that's what I'm gonna be asked to the people at Tallahassee. Was this put together by Democrats or Republicans? And was it put together generally? And so my associates would ask me that question, and so I have to answer that question in format.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, what I would
Yes.
say is this is a best practice process, going through an IRP like we're doing, so we're following best practice, which is nonpartisan.
It's not nonpartisan.
Let's leave it at that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that'd be equal right, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Thank you, Mr.
It's
Chair.
all.
Seeing no other public, I think we are done with that. Any member comments at this point? Hearing none, seeing no lights. Next meeting date, May 23rd. With that,
I'm sorry, quickly, just want to let you all know Daniel Morris, who's on the committee, we're going to follow up with him, but he put in his letter of resignation from GRU, so May 22nd will be his last day. He's taking a job in Tampa, so I'm assuming he's going to be stepping off of this board, but we'll confirm that. I just want to let you know.
okay, thank you. And on that note, are they going to be filling empty positions on the UAB at this?
So
I don't know at this point. So I know they did get, I think 2 candidates applied, but I don't know the direction. I'll figure that out and report back next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, do you have something?
I just wondered, had they ever replaced Carl Lab?
No.
No, there was an individual that applied. He had not moved to Gainesville yet, and they didn't feel comfortable putting him on here since he wasn't officially a resident, and so they put it back out, and I believe they got 2 candidates through that process.
And I just want to point out, Tony, the civics training you're getting, that's one of the many benefits that we offer here at GRU. So, all right. You guys have a good night. We are.